Thank you. I've actually, I think I've turned this on, or I've turned it off, or actually it's no, I've done something with it. It's neither on nor off. It doesn't really matter, does it? No. You can hear me? Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you. So, philosophy majors. Fewer than I thought. Sort of liberal arts in general. Psychology, sociology, anthropology, computer science. Okay. So I was actually my undergraduate major was in philosophy. My undergraduate major was in philosophy, and for me the assumption was I was going to go to law school. And then in my who wants to go to law school here? In my senior year, I took a look at law school, and I looked at the socialization process. And as I say, and all the people who know me agree, I was much too much of an arrogant bastard to go to a socialization process that made you into an arrogant bastard. So I passed on that, and I had nothing else to do. So I ended up going into computer science, mainly because I had a buddy who was a research scientist in the Yale CS lab, and I almost knew how to program, and he vouched for me. So I snuck in the door in terms of computer science. As Peter said, I tend to wear two hats in this world. One is professor of computer science at Northwestern, focused primarily on artificial intelligence. I run the master's program in AI, and a program called CS plus X, which is looking at the various ways in which computer science can actually be associated with other fields. So I do a fair amount of time over, ironically, at the law school, but it's to wipe out the law school is the goal. To look at issues of how computation is affecting the law. Certainly our School of Journalism, our med school, and so I spend a lot of time outside of computer science as a result. I went on leave for a few years to found narrative science. And we're going to talk a little bit about the narrative science, pieces of the narrative science technology. But it's sort of important to see this from the point of view of where I'm coming from. I care about the relationship between computers and people because, and it's an odd thing, and oddly enough, I'm in the middle of fighting for us to hire somebody who, I have other faculty members who are like, no, he doesn't do core computer science. It's like, yes, he does. He does computer science as it is associated with human beings. Not human-computer interaction in terms of displays and UI or whatever, but actually understanding the impact of computers on people and people on computers. So this is the core of what I care about in relationship to AI. Because for me, there are really three big questions in the world. There's the nature of the physical world. That is the way in which. There's a little piece of this that's auto changing. This is my fault. There's the nature of the physical world, and that is physics. All things physics. And understanding how the physical world, how things bump into each other in interesting ways, is absolutely crucial to understanding our world. The second thing is really the nature of the biological world, life and how it arose. So biology and ecology, evolution, and then we're going to keep doing this. Don't worry, I know where this stops. And then the third thing is the nature of intelligence. So physics, biology, intelligence. And you can look at intelligence in a lot of ways. You can look at it from the point of view of psychology, because we actually have a thing in the world which is sort of an existence proof of intelligence, and that's us. And understanding how we work is important. And then there is what I do, and that is trying to build it. So I build things that are intelligent. That's actually what my job is. And in particular, I care about, for this talk, although it's not everything I care about, in particular I care about the notion of language. And that is, how can a machine actually make use of language in a way that human beings do? And language is astounding. It's astounding. The fact that we can communicate as much as we can communicate through language is, for me, on a daily basis, is always a miracle. And to give you a sense of this miracle, I'm going to tell you a story. Now, the point of me telling you this story is not the story itself, it's that it is a story. And it's a super, super simple story. It's a story of my father. And it's really easy. He was an orphan. And he ended up becoming an archaeologist. So he started off with absolutely no knowledge of his personal past. And his entire life became uncovering the past. A fixation, a fascination with it. And you look at this, and you have an idea of this man in your head now. And you have an idea of the things that plagued him, of where his emotional life was, of the things that worried him, of the gaps in his being that actually ended up going from being an orphan to an archaeologist. And you know that, you understand that, because you have an idea of what kind of issues an orphan has. You know what archaeologists do for a living. And you can put those together to create a story in your head of who this man was. And I know I can communicate that to you. Because I know what's in your head, essentially. And I know the things I can do to tell you, to communicate things to you in a way that's easy and effective and straightforward. The thing is about language is more than words. We often will look at the words and we think that's what we're talking about. Language is a matter of stories and connections, expressing feelings and explanations. That's what language is. And it is astounding. It allows us to connect with each other, to tell each other about the past, to discuss the present, and actually project the future. That's what it does for us. It is, without a doubt, the most miraculous thing in the world. It is a hallmark of intelligence. There is nothing else that exists today that uses language quite the way we do. There is, you look at beavers and they build dams. You look at crows and they use tools. You look at a lot of different animals and they do a lot of different things. But nobody uses language the way we do. It is absolutely and utterly uniquely human. But we have a new partner. And that's the machine. And it's interesting to think about the machine in terms of language because it struggles with it. And when I say that, it's because when we're looking at the machine from the point of view of the devices that we use, we feel like there's language there. We feel like there's something going on with regard to language. But it's not quite. So, who uses like Siri or Alexa or Cortana or Hey Google? It's like it's part of our lives now. They're fantastic. Personal assistants are fantastic. Speech to text is astounding. But it's not language. And I'll give you a sense of this. For a lot of the people, and it's like whenever you see an interview with somebody who's like on the Cortana team or the Alexa team, they will tell you know what I want? I want a world that's just like the world of Star Trek that I saw as a kid. Where you talk to the computer, and the computer would always know what you wanted, and you could really have a conversation with it. It was fantastic. It was wonderful. So I went back and looked at old Star Trek. Now, oddly enough, this isn't even old Star Trek. This is like older Star Trek. But it's not the oldest of Star Trek. And what the conversation with the computer looked like. And this was my favorite conversation because this comes up over and over and over again in The Next Generation. And it's Jean-Luc Picard goes into his stateroom and things are going on the ship. And walks in and he says,
Tea Earl Grey hot.
Tea Earl Grey hot. I think that all of us have had that moment in our life when we walk up to someone we know, our spouse, our significant other, our roommate, whatever, and say, tea Earl Grey hot. And you look at it and go, For one thing, the computer knows everything's going on in the ship. It's sort of like, there are things exploding, people dying, there's an investigation going on, data's going on a rampage, the second in command, Riker, he's like confused and upset. And it's 4 o'clock, which is tea time. And he always comes in at 4 o'clock for tea time. And he says the same damn thing every single time. Tea, oh great hot. For once, you would like the computer to say, I know you want hot tea. You don't have to put that at the end. And I've never seen you drink anything but Earl Grey, and it's tea time. And by the way, is that the way you talk to people? That's just not appropriate. This is not language. This is, from a technical point of view, what's called a SQL query. It's the object and 2 modifiers. Right? This is not the way we talk with people. And in fact, if you started talking to somebody this way, they would be bizarrely annoyed with you, and they would think you were strange. When I talk to Alexa, I don't say, golly, Alexa, how you doing this morning? It's a wonderful day, isn't it? What do you think I should be doing today? That's not the kind of conversation I have with Alexa. The conversation I have with Alexa is, Alexa, weather. And Alexa tells me, and now I can do a wonderful thing that is Alexa tells me, and she pauses for a moment and keeps listening. So I can now say, Alexa, weather, and she tells me, and I go, tomorrow. And she'll know to hook tomorrow to the request for weather and tell me about tomorrow as well. That was a big step forward. This is like, it would be like tea, Earl Grey hot. You pause for a moment in a cup. Just clarifying things. So for us, language is this marvelous window onto the world. But this is something where this window is closed to the machine right now. And a lot of what I do is I look at how to open this window up. Because it knows so much. And to give you a sense of how much it knows, we're going to step through a little bit. The machine used to have the stuff that it cared about. That is, who was logged in and what programs were running and its uptime and what it was connected to. It was a simple world for the machine. But the network came into play. The web came into play. IoT came into play. And the desire for information came into play. And so now the machine has not only sort of everything you've searched for, every transaction you've done online, everything you've touched in terms of documents. It knows about immigration. It knows about crime. It knows about the performance of various drugs in terms of diseases. It knows about education. It knows about your body, if you've got Fitbit. If you've got a Nest in your home, it knows about your HVAC system. Your car is collecting data about itself all the time. Massive amounts of data. And to give you a real sense of it, this is the equivalent. The data that gets moving through the pipes is about 2.5 zettabytes of data. And my guess is, and this is my guess, that number is absolutely fundamentally meaningless to you. 2.5 zettabytes. It's like, yeah. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate that. I don't know how that compares to like grains of sand, on the beach. 2.5 zettabytes. Well, we can make it a little clearer. It's equivalent of 250,000 libraries of Congress being produced every single day. And I think we all have had the experience of wandering through the Library of Congress and opening up every book and paging through and counting the words and getting a real sense of that. So that also is kind of meaningful. And there's a really lovely, meaningful number. And it's not here. Oh, it's breaking my heart. And then here's the meaningful number. The information that we collect every day is the equivalent of 500 books every day for every man, woman, and child on the face of the planet. 500 books a day. And we're doing it all the time. And that number is growing every single day. And the notion here is that we no longer have we no longer have data that's human. We are capturing as much as we can capture. And what's the goal? To capture everything. We want to be able to meter everything because we want to know what's going on in the world so we can make decisions about it. I mean, that's our goal. And we have this data, and the data look interesting. You go to Google and you do a search on data and you look at images, you get things like this, which are kind of pretty. It's sort of the matrix, the post-matrix world of what we think data might look like. Data really look like this on a good day, and this is actually pretty good data. It's in tabular form, which is excellent because usually that means we know what all the rows and columns mean. It's dollar amounts. There are little dollar signs. I know you can't quite see them. There are little dollar signs there. I love the fact that anything that's red, that's a negative number, is in red, which kind of assumes that someone's going to look at this table, which is a ridiculous idea because it's way too big for anyone to actually look at. And this is pretty good data. Most of our data is not this good. It's not this pretty. But there's a lot of it. And the problem is that we have so much of it, we're trying to figure out how we're going to look at it and interpret it. Because we started on a search for information, and we got data. And data and information aren't even vaguely the same thing. One might feed into the other. This data can feed into information, but they're not the same thing. Well, for a while, we had this idea that everyone must become data literate. And it was like there was reading, writing, and arithmetic. Bizarrely referred to as the 3 R's. Because they both have an sound in them. All 3 of them have an sound in them. And it was like, oh, and we're going to add in data analytics. And everyone is going to have to learn how to do data analytics in order to survive in the world of the future. It was an interesting idea. The other was, what we can do is we can take all this data, and instead of being numbers, we can make it into pictures. We can visualize this data, and it will be fantastic. You won't have to read the numbers. You can look at a picture, and you understand what's happening in the world today. A great notion. We can hire data scientists. The data scientist is this wonderful creature. What the data scientist is somebody who understands a business, understands the problems that need to be solved, understands data, understands statistics, understands analytics, understands programming, can talk to the people on the business side, and can talk to people on the sort of IT side, the technical side, and act as a sort of a bridge between these two worlds. Fabulous notion. Problem is that we're not all going to become data literate. In fact, I think the notion that the argument that we should all become data literate is mildly offensive. And oddly enough, the argument comes from people who are data literate. And essentially what they're saying is, yes, we have all this data. We have a world of open data. We want all the data to go out there. And by the way, the only people who are going to be able to deal with that data are people who have my skills. And if you don't have my skills, you'll be left behind. So that's by no means a democratization of data in any way, shape, or form. It's the meritocratization of data. It's saying that you absolutely have to have certain sets of skills that you'll fall behind. And those skills are amazingly complex and might have nothing to do with what you normally do on a day-to-day basis. The notion of visualization is borderline ridiculous. Because once you get one piece of visualization, one viz, and you can see one chart or graph, that's great. But in fact, most of the data that we care about is like not 1, but 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 charts and graphs. And trying to look at them all at the same time and figure out what's going on is incredibly difficult. And as the data scientist, imagine you're really, really, really smart. And you really understand business, and you really understand the world of analytics. And the people on the business side don't understand analytics, and the people on the analytics side don't understand business. And your job is to be a bridge between them. That means your job is to explain things to people who don't understand what you're talking about all the time. It's an amazingly frustrating job. Where you have to explain to the business people that actually the statistics are such that they're making the wrong decision, and you have to actually explain to the people on the analytics side that this is an important problem that they have to solve. Right? And then you have to do that every single day. So those aren't solutions. I'm going to ask a question. This will be an interesting audience for this question. Who has, I don't know, the last month looked at a spreadsheet? As high as you can. All right. That, by the way, from my perspective, from the perspective of somebody who cares about language and data and information, that's an abomination that you have to do that. Because what do you, I mean, either, sometimes you look at spreadsheets for names and addresses and things. Sometimes you look at spreadsheets to see, how is everyone doing, how is everyone in this class doing? How am I doing in all my classes? Am I getting better or am I getting worse? How do I stand with regard to things? Where you're doing really fairly commodity reasoning against the data set that's presented to you in tabular form. And that's ridiculous. And that's a failure of technology to help you. By the way, there is no audience I've ever asked this question to where at least you are actually lighter than most. It's at least 80%. Usually it's like 90, 95% of the hands go up. Because that's the data we get. That's the gift we were given by our technology to look at things in tabular form in spreadsheets. I fully intend to live to see the day when I ask that question and no hands go up. And people look at me as though I'm nuts. People look at me as though I have asked the parallel question. Who here has, in the last month or so, programmed using computer punch cards? Not only do no hands go up, you're like, why the hell would you ask that question? No one. That's an old technology. That's the old way of doing things. It's the old way of interacting with machines. And I want it to be the spreadsheet. And data as that ends up going away. So we have to find meaning. We have to take a look at this data and we find meaning. And that's where the kind of stuff that I work on comes from. So what I work on, roughly speaking, is what's referred to as natural language generation. And it's the idea that given some data, simple data. So this is, I'm going to show you two spreadsheets. Unbelievably simple. One actually looks at, from the point of view of quarter to quarter, looks at products which are identified uniquely by IDs because we want to do that if we're doing a good job with our data, and then numbers associated with sales. So for every quarter, for these two products, for every quarter, sales numbers. And then because we have what's called normalizing this data, we have another sheet that maps from ID to the name. So the name can be anything we want as long as the ID is crisp and clean. You would be able to look at these two sheets and in a couple minutes figure out what's going on with these two products and say something about it. But that would be an amazing waste of your time. An amazing waste of your time. Even those two movies. Because it's also possible to have a machine do it. And what the machine ends up doing is saying, while slightly better than sales of the small light widget, sales of the overly large widget have been on decline over the past year. During the same period, sales of the small light widget have been steadily improving. So we have two products. One is doing better, but it's beginning, it's waning, it's dropping, and the other is on the rise and probably will pass it soon. And that's what you want when you look at this data. That's what you want to know. Now this, and you see, whenever there's a little circle there, like that, that means this was generated by machine. It was a machine that looked at this data, figured out what's going on, and turned it into English. And this idea has been with us for a while. In fact, I would say that for most of my colleagues in AI, we have all written natural language generators at some point. It was always because you build a system, you want to know what's going on inside of it, and you don't want to look at the guts of it. So you have it tell you. You build a generator and you have it tell you. And the problem is that you build that, and then you do your, it's like you're doing your project work, you're doing your dissertation, you write your stuff up, you throw stuff away. And what happens is nobody ever writes up, or rarely writes up, unless it's your focus, what they did with their natural language generator. Because who needs a natural language generator? I mean, we didn't have a lot the machine was doing that made any difference to us. But now there's a lot that a machine is doing that makes a difference to us. And the thing that we would build would always look like this. I have a set of facts. And I have a thing that can look at those facts and then generate language, generate words from those facts, generate statements from those facts. But I want you to think about this for a moment. Where are the facts? There are no facts here. This is just data. Now, it's true, I told you. I had a moment where I told you what's going on here. And you'll be able to figure it out because they're good. These are well formed in terms of being friendly to humans. Most data sets aren't. But we know the quarter. When we're talking about a quarter, we're talking about a period of time. 3-month period of time. When I'm talking about a product, I'm talking about some entity in the world. When I'm talking about sales, it's a metric. It could be other sales. It could be other metrics. It could be cost. When I got the other one, I'm looking at this, and I know that there's an ID that's a mapping, and I know that the rest is a name. Now, that is what you use in order to look at this data and turn it into information. You have this notion of what these data map onto in the world. And if you don't know that, then, in fact, the data are worthless to you. It's just worthless. So when you've got all this, you can actually say things like sales of the overly large widget, an interesting name for a product, have been on the decline over the past year. So the thing is that generating language actually requires understanding what's going on in the world. It requires understanding the meaning of what the data that we have really is. And so if we have a larger data set, and this is actually a data set that comes from Salesforce. And it's a standard, it's sort of a standard Salesforce data set. Anyone who uses Salesforce probably uses the same basic scheme. It is, again, it's impenetrable. I mean, you look at it, it's like, wow, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. But you can use this to actually do the kind of analysis that you want. But in order to do it, you need more than the data. You need to understand that this is a report about a salesperson. So I'm going to actually explain what's going on with a salesperson. I need to know that what I'm looking at is performance and progress. And performance is, how is she doing now? And progress is she getting better or worse? So there are two different kinds of analysis. We need to know the difference between things like she's doing exceptional and extremely well. Exceptional, she's near the very, very top. Extremely well, she's up there. We also need to know that there's a team. There's a cohort that is associated with it. And that she's near the top of this cohort. And that, in fact, we see things like overall improvement. That is not one metric, but a lot of metrics. And it's figuring out how she's doing in a global sense. And my favorite thing, there's an interesting thing about Salesforce that's related to this. So Salesforce allows you to, it's like, this is me talking to the people who do sales with nerd science. Salesforce allows you to, you're out and about in the world and you shake someone's hand and they give you their card. And they're with the company you want to do business with. And so what you do, if you're a good person, is you put them in Salesforce at the very beginning of your pipeline. And you say, the odds of getting a deal with this person is 10%. Because I've had one little conversation. I have a follow-up phone call with them, and after the follow-up phone call, maybe the odds of getting a deal with them, maybe go up to 20. And the more you do, the greater the odds. So you can look at your pipeline and see what your pipeline is worth. But salespeople don't like being called on the carpet for not doing follow-up work. And so if you're at 10%, or 20%, 30%, you won't even show up in Salesforce. And so your pipeline ends up looking wonky. Now, if you know that this is a possibility, if you know that if you take a look at somebody's sales today and their pipeline, and you realize that their pipeline and their sales don't line up, you can actually ask them to do a better job of it. But the you can also be a machine. And that's what this is. When it says it's difficult to assess our current pipeline, the data seem to be faulty in general. That is to say, it doesn't add up. And the reason why the system knows it doesn't add up is because the system knows how all these relationships in this data should look like. And once it figures out what the relationships in the data look like, it can tell you. And the thing of it is, this means that we have this world of data out there. And we can do the things that, that we would normally associate with what's called data science. And that is, you've got to analyze that data and figure out what's happening. And if you can figure out what's happening, you can generate new facts. All right? So she's at the top of her team with regard to a method. You can go to the data to figure that out if you know how to figure it out. But it turns out figuring out things like that is easy. It's straightforward. The kinds of calculations you can do are fairly straightforward and simple. And so all you've got to do is know what you're looking for and know how the data is structured, and you can get to facts. But once you have a set of facts, you want to draw some inferences about them. You want to make decisions about those facts. And in particular, you want to figure out what facts are interesting and important. So if I'm telling you about what's going on in the stock market today, and I know that you own stock in a company, and another company that has nothing to do with that company has tanked, has gone bankrupt, but the company that you own stock on has gone up 3%, what am I going to tell you about first? Probably the thing you care about, that is that your stock is going up. The fact that this other company is tanked, you don't give it to him. You just don't give it to him. It has nothing to do with you. So it's actually, in a sort of a global sense, it's important, but it's uninteresting. And so you've got to draw inferences about what is interesting or not interesting, what's important and not important, and turn it into an outline. And once you have an outline, then you can generate language. And the thing you generate isn't a sentence. It's an action narrative. It's a story about what's happening in the world. So the notion is, with all of this, with data to facts to language, we can begin to open up this window. And that means that we can do things that are actually kind of exciting. When we started narrative science, I actually was out with one of our salespeople in New York, and she would do this thing where I would fly to New York, I hit LaGuardia at 9 o'clock in the morning, I took a cab for our first meeting, and she would just have me go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting all day until I got another cab and went home. And it was a flight at 8:30 that would go on. And she would just fill my day because it would be valuable use of my time. It would be good use of my time. But we wouldn't really eat. Sometimes she carried protein bars that just hand me. She'd eat the protein bar. And every once in a while we had the luxury of going to Whole Foods and getting a salad and sitting for 5 minutes. And as we were in Whole Foods, she looked over. There's this woman who had a spreadsheet on a clipboard. And she said, well, can we fix that? I was like, yeah, of course. That's what we want to fix. Because that's a horrible job. It's a horrible job, what she was doing. And so we decided to fix that. We ended up having data for grocery stores. And there's a lot of grocery stores and a lot of data. And it's actually really valuable and useful data, but it's totally meaningless. Because you can't take this and hand it to the person who is running the deli and say, do something with this. You just can't. And in fact, you can't even tell them to do something with this because there's not enough information about how what you're doing compares to other people, how other people are doing, to make it useful. So they gave us the data, and we started producing a monthly report for every single manager, for every single division, every single store. So if you run the deli in one store, you're getting a report that's not dissimilar to the person who's running a deli in all the other stores. And what's interesting is that some of it is about the past, but some of it is about the future. And this might seem like the most ridiculous piece of information you get in the world, but although the opportunity to reduce loss is the highest for self-service cookies, people are stealing your cookies. That's it. Concentrating on European heritage bread may have greater impact overall as it consistently has the higher sales. That is to say, the margins on that bread are higher. And so if you're going to push on something, push on that. Because that's the best bang for the buck you're going to get by changing your behavior in your bakery. And the idea here is that I can look at all the things that's going on in your bakery and all the things that are going on in all the other bakeries, and I can see where they're doing well or you're falling behind. And I can actually give you a little bit of information about that. Of course, if every single month I tell you the same thing, that's annoying. And so the system actually remembers what it's told you. And it doesn't tell you to do the same thing over and over again because that is something that no one will read. But every once in a while, it'll remind you about something that you might not be taking care of. And it shifts its focus so that you can understand what's going on in your world in a way that's easy to read, for one thing, and actually allows you to change your activity. Actually, I'm going to skip this It's sweet, but I'm going to skip it. And we can go back to it. Because this one is my favorite. Without a doubt, my favorite. The city of Chicago, and we'll give you a sense of why I care about this. The city of Chicago has sensors up and down the lake. And they sense things like water temperature, what's called turbidity, that's particulate matter. Some things having to do with chemical composition, movement of the water, and wavelengths. And each one of these sensors, and there's a lot of them, each one of these sensors reports back to a central unit, and the city publishes this data. Again, not the most readable data you've ever seen in your life. On any given day in the city of Chicago, there may be a half dozen people who know both about data and the sensors, or I know about the data, the sensors, and water to make any sense of this. But the city publishes it because it's an open data city. But what do you do with it? And for us it was, well, why don't we have a system look at it, read that data, hear what's going on, and tell you about it. And the U is, anyone can read. And what it tells you is, for the week ending July 16, 2016, 63rd Street Beach was the cleanest beach in Chicago as measured by the cloudiness of the water. Ohio Street Beach was the dirtiest beach in Chicago. And if you want to go to the beach, beachgoers would be advised to visit Oak Street Beach that had a better than average cleanliness rating. That is to say, if you're thinking of going to Ohio, don't. Go to Oak Street. The thing I like about this is that we go from a half dozen people can understand the data set to everyone who lives in Chicago, who can millions upon millions upon millions of people who are making a decision about going to the beach. And this is something they can take action on. It's something they can understand and do something with. The data is meaningless. It's valuable, but meaningless, because they don't understand where the data come from, what the data mean, and what to do with it. And then, for your world, or for our world, standardized tests. You all take even to get here, you need to take standardized tests. So who's taken a standardized test, I don't know, within the last year? Year? A few, I mean, you remember the experience, right? You sit down in a room, and you're filling in little bubbles, and then you wait, and then somebody comes to you, a piece of paper comes to you, and it usually has two primary numbers, your score and the percentile. So it is what your raw number is, which is absolutely meaningless. I mean, absolutely meaningless. It's like, you got an 83. Oh, that puts you in the 97th percentile. Oh! Right? That's great. And then you ask yourself, what am I supposed to do with this? Right? Now, for a lot of people, it means, if you don't do well, you just keep doing, you practice. You take more and more tests. And there's a whole set of exercises around test taking with regard to standardized tests, which is great. But there's so much more in there. Because in the data associated with standardized tests, for any time you get a wrong answer, understand that there are four answers. One of them's right. 3 of them are wrong. But the 3 of them are not wrong in the same way. Okay? They're not wrong in the same way. And what that means is the way in which the mistake that you make for one question might be different than the mistake someone else made for that question, even though you both got it wrong. But who is going to sit there and mind that? City of Chicago has the MAP tests, which were designed explicitly so that after you take the tests, people could look at them and figure out what's going on and actually give you an analysis. Give you analysis of of where a student is and how they're progressing and the ways in which they're progressing. In order to deal with that, you need to be, dare I say, a data scientist. And so there was an effort for a while to try to teach all the Chicago public schools teachers to become data scientists. Now, this had a flaw in two areas. One, public school teachers are not the most, they don't have a lot of time on their hands to ramp into the complexities of data analytics and statistics. That's the first thing. The second is, if I teach someone how to be a data scientist, and they look at their salary as a Chicago public school teacher, and they look at the salary of a data scientist, they will no longer be a public school teacher. Because it's like 5 times. It's not like a trivial difference. And even if I give them, even if I give them the skills and they stay, there's a level of data they simply don't have access to. That is, they don't have access to the data about everybody. They have access to the data about their students. So we looked at this too. And we did something that I absolutely love. And then certainly you want retrospective. That is, in physics, you need to focus on issues of magnetics and electrostatics. You seem to be having problems with some of the basic questions in these areas. Basic question means other people are doing well in these areas that other students are managing well. So it's not like you're at the edge of it. It's that there's some basics that you need to understand. And that's useful, but nowhere near as useful as saying you should look back to section 3 to 5 in chapter 7 of the material for magnetics and section 3 in chapter 6 for electrostatics. That is, you can give actual advice based upon someone's performance. And it's advice that we're not going to be able to get real people to learn. In the brick and mortar world, this is not, you don't get to this. Because this advice, one, you have to understand the test. You have to understand what it's connected to. You have to understand where the materials are. You have to understand how someone's doing with regard to everybody else. Because if you're messing up on magnetics, and so is everybody else, the problem is not you. It's something else. And even turning this into something where you can come back to a teacher and say, by the way, in general, your students are having problems in these areas. You should refocus them. This provides a way to understand and diagnose and then give advice around kinds of behaviors that are almost invisible to us, although we have all the data in the world to deal with them. So the notion here is all based upon one kind of straightforward idea. And that is that the language that we use, and we want the machine to use, flows from meaning. We want the machine to say things that it knows to be true, that there's a reflection of what's true in the world and what it means to say it sometimes. But meaning flows, in this instance, from analysis. That is, looking at data and figuring out what's going on. And the analysis you choose depends upon the goals that you're trying to satisfy, what you want the machine to communicate with you. Because there are lots of kinds of analysis you can do against any given data set. And quite truthfully, I don't need to know if there's a correlation between the player number and the scoring capability of a player in college basketball. That players who have primes as their number tend to score better than players who don't is not an interesting thing for me. I can get it, I can do the analysis and find it and see if the distribution is such that that's true, but that's not what I'm going to look for. I'll look for other characteristics that are actually predictive of performance. So analysis is driven by the goals, and the goals come from us. That if we can say, this is what I need to know, and have the system go through and say, okay, given that you need to know this thing, given that you need to know how someone is doing with regard to a metric, then I know how to do that. I need to look at the raw number. I need to look at how they compare to others. I can look at change over time, and I can say, this person is doing well, and is doing better, and it's at the top. And that's what you want the machine to be able to do. Because the reality is, with language, the language machine is in a place where it can actually share its stories. And it has a lot of stories to share. So it has a lot of things to tell us now. There was a time when we did not have, the machine did not have access to enough to make it worthwhile to worry really hard about generating language and what it did, because it didn't know language. It knew things that were specific. And we can free all this information that's actually trapped in the data. And the important thing for me is this: spreadsheets. So you look at a spreadsheet, and you've got to figure out what's going on in that data and what it means. That's your job. And in much the same way that when you use online systems, you have to actually, in some sense, kowtow to the designer of that system and be more like the machine. The more like the machine you are, the better you can use these systems. When you talk to Alexa and you say, Alexa, weather, that's not human. I mean, that's not human. That's you building a query for a system that can't understand language. When you say, Alexa, weather tomorrow, San Francisco, that's not language anymore. You're actually matching the machine capabilities. But if we can bring the machine more to us, then we don't have to do that anymore. And in fact, I would say my argument in general is that the more we humanize the machine, the more we bring it to us, the less we have to compromise in terms of who we are as human beings. And I think the end game for AI is to help further actualize humanity as a species. And I'm happy to talk about that. But right now, all I want to do is get rid of spreadsheets and actually allow us to have conversations with the machine. Because the conversation with the machine having a language, it means we can actually have a real partnership. Now, I'm going to talk for a half second about AI, as AI in general. Because a lot of people get confused about what it is. Now, this is an instance of, this is like almost pure AI. Natural language generation in this form is absolutely pure AI. We don't use a lot of machine learning. There are places where machine learning makes sense in this, but we don't use a lot. But AI is, when you think of it, is the beginnings of something else. So there's AI, but you've got it. And of course, there's the thing we always hear about with regard to AI is data analytics and machine learning. I mean, it is the thing that is driving machine learning and data analytics from an AI perspective is what's driving the field more than anything else in the world. So Siri exists. Self-driving cars exist because of data and analytics and machine learning. And I'll give you a simple example of this. The Google self-driving car, which was the first real breakthrough moment in self-driving cars. Google's self-driving car was developed by a fellow by the name of Sebastian Thrun. And Sebastian was a professor of computer science at Stanford in robotics. And he and his team won, I think it was 2007, won the DARPA Grand Challenge for driving across a course with a car. It was like 112 miles. Many of the cars didn't make it at all. And actually, one of the cars fell over because it had really tall sensors and it was imbalanced. But his made it. And so Google ended up coming to him and saying, Sebastian, we would like you to come to work for Google and build a self-driving car. And it's like, oh, that's fine. I love that research. And they're like, no, we don't want you to research a self-driving car. We want you to build a self-driving car. And we want that self-driving car to be able to drive on its own with absolutely no human at the helm from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And Sebastian Thrun said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's a stupid idea. It won't work. And Google said, I don't know if you know this, but we're Google. And we have more money than God. And he said, no, it's not a matter of money. It's not a matter of money. It can't be done. And they said, maybe we didn't phrase this right. We're Google. We will let you hire anyone you want to hire. He's like, no. It's not a matter of people. It's not a matter of how many people we have. It's something else altogether. It just can't be done. And they said, equipment. We will buy and create equipment for you. No, it's not a matter of equipment. And then they said, oh, we haven't, there's one other thing we haven't mentioned because we haven't actually announced a Google Street View yet. But we've had cars driving all over the country, on almost every road in the country, for quite some time now. And each of these cars has external sensors that's picking up video information, LiDAR information, sonar information. And inside the car, every single knob in that car that has to do with control of the car has been metered. So we have sub-second by sub-second data on people driving cars for over a million miles. And Sebastian Spruan said, oh, you should have led with that. Of course. Because I can take that and I can build the rules for a responsive system. That when there's a little bit too much yellow on the side, I can move a little to the right. When I know about the distance between me and the car in front of me, I know when to stop. When things are getting close, I know when to veer. And the core of the rule set that is associated with self-driving cars today came from that. The same holds true with Siri. Siri is a product of grabbing hold of speech utterances and the text that people actually wanted to have associated with them, and the corrections that they made. We have millions upon millions of them, and that's how speech recognition works. All of this driven completely and utterly by data. So artificial intelligence and data analytics are linked at the hip. And machine learning, well, what you're doing with all this data is you're learning from it. And you've got to figure out not only how to learn, but what you're going to be learning. AI on a symbolic level is in charge of that. But then there's this other thing, and that's us, and this notion of human cognition. Because we think in a way that's very different than the way machines think. And it is a struggle to make sure that when we've got a machine that's making a decision, that it can communicate the decision it's making in a way that makes sense to us. So the thing that's actually quite striking about people, well, actually the thing that's striking about people is that we've made it to the point at which we are. I mean, it's astounding. Because the reality of human beings are a serviceable collection of heuristics, combined with a complete and utter misunderstanding of statistics. I mean, that's who we are. We have machines that are all about the statistics, all about the stats. And we need to find a way to make a bridge between that, and actually help people not make the mistakes that they tend to make all the time, which is to say, the mistakes that are associated with what's normally called as behavioral economics. And of course, human-computer interaction and computational social science. That is, be able to look at social behaviors and human behaviors and machine behaviors from a computational point of view and see what works and doesn't work. And this gives us something that is different than just AI. It's a notion of integrated intelligence. And that is a combination of human thoughtfulness and machine thoughtfulness in integrated systems. And when we think about what's going to happen next, I actually believe that integrated intelligence is the next big step for us. And that is thinking about partnerships. In much the same way that the world of business is actually shifting towards ephemeral teams of people who work on projects and then fall back apart and then work on different projects. It's not just a career, but tasks that you do within the teams. As in much the same way that the business is moving in that direction, integrated intelligence, where AI is pulled into those teams, is one of the next steps, where it becomes a partner for you in your team, not just a thing that's making decisions and you listen to those decisions blindly. Okay. And that is where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to ask if you have any, dare I say it, questions. You can do it. Yes.
Where do you see that on a global level, and in that competitive world that we live in between, technology-wise, economic-wise, and social-wise, the competition between the U.S. and China in the field of intelligence?
China, probably for the next 5 years, is going to just whip our butts. So I went to Beijing, I don't know, 9 months ago, and there were a couple things. One, when I entered customs, when I went through, when I was entering China, I spent 45 seconds standing in front of the camera, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But they really know what I look like, and they know what I look like down to the level where their distributed cameras on the streets can identify me. And one of the reasons why they can do it and we can't is because their relationship with privacy is different than our relationship with privacy. If we try to do that here, it would be through the roof, people being upset. We're kind of in the middle. Europe is much more, has tightened down much more than we have. So for a while, they're going to kick our butts. But they're going to kick our butts in particular areas. And those areas are areas where the technology was called deep learning. That is learning that's based upon massive data sets for doing things like face recognition, voice recognition, the use of massive sensor arrays for things like self-driving cars. They're going to really win for a while there. And I think right now, for the major AI conferences, they're about 60% Chinese in terms of paper submissions. But there hits a point where you have to stop making black boxes that do something and start thinking about you have to start building systems that interact with people. And they're not as good. And there I think we are going to push forward. But we're going to go through a wave of hurting badly and being embarrassed in terms of technologies that really do a great job. But it really is the case that in Beijing, if you jaywalk on an empty street, you'll get a ticket, and it'll be sent to you because they know who you are, because the cameras are there. I actually don't have a lot of trouble with that. I'm not a huge privacy person. But then again, I know how to get around face recognition. But that is actually kind of spooky.
Just a quick follow-up question. I heard like this technology, facial recognition, is not perfected even in China when the skin colors change.
Yeah.
So did they already resolve that issue, or is it still the case?
It's your training set. I mean, the facial recognition systems that fall by the wayside, that make mistakes, were just trained badly. And if you think of it, imagine you grew up in this is my people. Imagine you grew up in Norway, and the only people you've ever seen are like tall blondes. That's it. It's not a matter of liking or disliking. Those are the only people you've ever seen. And you see someone who's not a tall blonde, you'll be confused. And that's what these systems, what's happened with these systems. Unfortunately, they were built by people who should know better in terms of knowing how to train systems. And so the mistakes they make end up being not just borderline, but relatively offensive. But you expand the training set, and you train systems on better training sets, and you do a little bit in terms of saying, here are the features you should really care about. This guide you with it. And again, this is more of an interactive than just a straight learning system. You won't get those problems. But you really, one of the big things right now in terms of machine learning is a bias that flows into the system because of the training set. And one of the most egregious of this was Amazon built an HR system that would evaluate resumes and was the first pass at deciding whether or not somebody was going to get an interview. It turned out to be incredibly gender biased. Incredibly gender biased. Like, they couldn't even understand it. But then they realized, what we're doing is we were using our performance records for everybody who works for us. And it turns out it wasn't that the system was gender biased. It was that the data was gender biased because Amazon is gender biased. And that performance reviews for women fell short of performance reviews for men because it's It's not a fair environment. And so it actually exposed something else that was going on. And we will see this over and over and over again. And the thing I like is that it's not the algorithm. The algorithms are fine. It's the nature of the bias that comes from the data. And I think what will happen over time is we'll see more and more the algorithms telling us, because of their performance, where we have bias that we have never seen before, that didn't even occur to us that we had. Yes.
What do you think about universal basic income? Because as we know, self-driving cars and other machines will drive humans out of work eventually. And one of the presidential hopefuls, Andrew Yang, he is suggesting basing his campaign on premises of universal basic income. So what do you think about it?
That is actually, so here's what I think is going to happen. We'll keep pushing forward in AI. I don't know if we're going to have, I don't know how fast we're going to go. We had an acceleration that looked great, and we'll see if we can keep that up. I've been working in AI all my life, and I fundamentally believe that there is no aspect of human cognition, none, no aspect at all of human cognition that cannot be replicated in a machine. The machine will do everything we can do, and it will end up doing it better. And so, yes, there is a future in which I think the necessity for human beings to do work will go away. And in that world, absolutely universal basic income. But universal basic income, guaranteed housing, guaranteed health care, guaranteed education, guaranteed actualization, because that's the way the world is supposed to be. Remember I said I thought that the end game for this was actualizing us as a species? There's this moment where if you don't have to work, people say, well, if you don't have to work, what do you do? And it's like, well, we become better. That's what we do. We become better at being people, at interacting with each other, at actually taking care of each other, at attending to each other. And we can do anything else we want as well. But we have so many people who surround us, who are in tremendous need, and we do not attend to their needs because nobody has time. Nobody has time. And the machine, I think, will give us that time. And so I think the next phase of us is actually going to be helped along by the machine taking on the things that we don't need to do. And we might have people who still want to do them, and they can do them, but we don't need to do them. We won't need to work. And that means we can do something else and become better. So universal basic income, that's a tiny piece of it. How do we get there? I have no idea. Because, the political system we have today is not there's one candidate who's talking about universal guaranteed income. And it's like, people in Silicon Valley will talk about it and they get, and then always it's like, well, so it devalues people. And it's like, no, it doesn't. You don't devalue people if you judge people by how much they make and the nature of their work. If that's the way you judge people, well, that's a very sad thing. People are more than that. But it's not even that tiny piece of it is controversial. And I don't know what's going to happen when we actually have, 2 million truckers out of work. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there'll be ugly times before it'll become pretty. Yeah.
So based on what you said about that there's no human cognition that can't be replaced by machines doing it better, are you not worried about machines, about us giving our responsibilities to machines to do, basically do things, like not necessarily just jobs or healthcare and things to do other people, but like just...
I think that'll be part of it. And the question is, if I have a machine that can do a better job of taking care of somebody than I can, that's fine. I don't mind that. I don't mind. It's a matter of what often people will think about. When I say things like this, they'll think about the machines that they stand today, and that's not what I'm talking about. They're not going to look like that. They're not going to be like that. And people say, well, but they don't have, machines don't have empathy. It's like because they haven't been built to have empathy. I mean, that's not what we've been thinking about. Although some people do. And then actually my favorite is, they're not going to be creative. And it's like, they already are. They already are. They build new, they create new things. There are things that don't exist in the world that are new. And then people say, yeah, but it's not like they're going to be like Da Vinci. It's like, you're right. Neither am I. Neither is anybody I've ever met. You can't, the standard is not going to be, one of the greatest designers who ever lived. It's like Steve Jobs. We're not going to, it's like, no, maybe not Steve Jobs tomorrow, but eventually Steve Jobs. Sure. I find the pushback on it is that people are worried about losing their specialness. But there are already people. We already have other people around us. I mean, with regard to those features, we're not special. We are what we are. And having more things that are smart are not going to make anything worse in terms of that. I think that for me, as we look at the future of machine intelligence, there are three things I care about with regard to building AI. And it's because AI, I think building AI is like having children. You want your AI to be smarter than you are. You want it to be more successful than you are. And like children, you want it to not kill you. I mean, that's what you want. And just keep that in mind. But you don't want to have it be that you give up on smarter and more successful. Yeah.
The gentleman in the right with the jean jacket has been raising his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask a question, kind of expanding on what you said, but given that no part of human cognition cannot be replicated, where philosophically do you come down on the fact that there is a human condition that has an expansion of capability of utter violence and multiple other negative aspects, and it's innate in every human being? Where do you come down on that, and how does that impact what you're doing, and maybe expand on that a little bit, because I find that very intriguing and important.
I mean, we come from a different place. I mean, there are many aspects of us that have to do with violence and anger and pain and sadness that come from we over time were built up to I'll use the word design, but not intentionally. From an evolutionary point of view, we ended up being designed for a certain kind of world, and to be able to manage it and breed in it. And that world, it really isn't the world we live in anymore, and we're trying to fit ourselves to it. But I think if we look at the machines, they're not. It's like that's not the world they're living in. And it's a matter of crafting for the world they live in, and the world that and what we want them to be. I actually think I have to admit, even from a moral perspective, I think the machines are going to be way better than we are. Because my favorite thing is when people look at self-driving cars, and then I'll stop. When people look at self-driving cars and they try to, you give them those questions. If it's you have a self-driving car and it has one passenger in it, and there are like 5 children over here, and it's going to run into the 5 children, and the only way it can avoid running into the 5 children is to veer into a wall, and it will kill the passenger. Almost everybody says, veer into the wall. Oh my God, you don't want to run down children. Ooh. And then you ask, will you buy that car? No. Are you kidding? I want a car that takes care of me. It's going to protect me. So even though it's going to do something which I think is fundamentally immoral, it damn well better be tribal for me and mine. And that's so human. And I want the machines to, from my perspective, machines shouldn't be like that. They shouldn't be like that. They should be more, I'm going to give one more half an example, and then I'll. And that's in the movie I, Robot. At the very end, it's the robot who's become more human, and Will Smith are trying to save the world by destroying the AI that's taken over everything. And they're climbing up this ladder to destroy the AI. And then Will Smith's girlfriend is being attacked by another robot. And Will Smith turns to the robot who's helping him save all of humanity and says, I'll do this, you save the girl. And the robot's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And I just want the robot to say, are you out of your mind? We're trying to save humanity. Are you kidding me? You think you can do it on your own? And it's like, oh, that's right, it's a movie, it was written that way. But it's like, that's insane. That's just like, it's like, and people look at, oh, he's more human. It's like, yeah, he's tribal instead of moral. It's like, that's not a good thing. Yes?
So you were talking about AI and the interpretation of AI with like data and spreadsheets. So I can see people really taking advantage of that in terms of like sports. But do you really think people would take advantage of that types of information in terms of like education and other types of things like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I tell you, my life has a certain characteristic to it, and that is for almost anyone who sort of does businessy things or organizational things, they will ask, well, could it do this? Because they have data they look at and they're trying to wrestle with. We gathered too much data, and so we're wrestling with trying to figure things out. It's been, I haven't hit an area yet where there isn't somebody who's saying, no, we want to do that. Yeah.
With cars becoming more innovative and like self-checkouts, what do you think the next big transition of artificial intelligence besides self-driving cars would be?
I think genuine conversational interfaces where we don't have to. We can literally talk with machines about what we want and what's important for us, and it's with us all the time.
It's almost like a self-doctor, self-aid, where they can help you figure out what's best for you.
Well, I think there's a ton of work that's going on right now that's exciting in medicine that is tracking conditions and the things that are the precursors, so that you can predict things and actually help people before things go bad. But also just to be able to, instead of having it be that you type into things or talk in sort of these weird stilted ways, just to be able to be in an environment where you're having an ongoing conversation with a machine that knows how to do a whole bunch of things that has to do with your life, and ask you questions about the things, reminds you of things that feels like a genuine personal assistant as opposed to Siri or hey Google, hey Google, pizza, anchovies, good, and that actually helps you at the level of in the morning, just talking to you about how your day is going to be and what you're going to do and how the week was and maybe what you changed in terms of your behavior and maybe you need more sleep. I mean, that really is a genuine helpmate as opposed to a machine.
Okay, let's, for the sake of time, we have to unfortunately stop, but let's give a warm...
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was super fun.